Dark Reader. Welcome to the Dark Side of the Library podcast. I'm your host, Katie. First of all, those who tend to listen every week, I totally screwed up last week. I missed an entire part, so there was, I think probably a minute, maybe even more, of just complete silence on the previous minisode, and I apologize. That was totally unprofessional. I fixed it. Hopefully you can now enjoy the entire episode without that whole ordeal. Next, I wanted to point out that we have an Amazon live shop, so you can come join us on our streams. We tend to post them on Instagram, but you can subscribe and follow us on Amazon on your Amazon account and get notifications for when we do go live. So that is amazon.com/live/darksideofthelibrary. We do a lot of cool stuff over there. So now, on to the actual episode. Thank you. On this minisode today, we are going to be talking about the widely anticipated book, The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. This is by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I love her writing. I loved Mexican Gothic. I also liked certain dark things. I did a podcast episode a couple months ago about that book in particular. But for those of you that are new here, or for those that have never heard of Silvia Moreno-Garcia, let me just share with you some of the books she's done. I still want to read quite a few from her, like Gods of Jade and Shadow is one that has been highly recommended to me. She is a Canadian-Mexican author. She's Mexican by birth and Canadian by inclination. Her fame kind of started with Gods of Jade and Shadow, which did receive quite a few awards, but Mexican Gothic took off her career substantially. She won a lot of awards for that. Velvet Was the Night is also one that is very notable. But what's interesting about her is that she has an MA in Science and Technology Studies from the University of British Columbia, and she currently lives in Vancouver, Canada, which is right next to me. I'm so excited. Maybe I should go see if I can meet her. I doubt it, but it would be so cool if I could. So like I said, I love her writing style. She does a great job with atmospheric Gothic horror, but it's not, a lot of it is usually slow burn. It's not a lot of jump scares. There's not a lot of spine tingling feelings. Many of her works involve more of exploring humanity and more on the philosophical end of horror, and I really enjoy it. Her characters tend to be very memorable. They feel they feel human, I guess. They have very fatal flaws. They have great prose. They have usually a huge swath of different characteristics and traits that make them, they feel like actual people. So in general, her writing is fantastic. So let me just summarize what the publisher has to say about The Daughter of Dr. Moreau that came out July 19th of 2022, so really recently. This is a historical science fiction, technically, with a lot of Gothic atmospheric horror involved in here. It is a reimagination of the H.G. Wells novel, famous novel, The Island of Dr. Moreau. I have never read that book, just an FYI. All right, so Carlota Moreau, a young woman growing up on a distant and luxuriant estate, safe from the conflict and strife of the Yucatan Peninsula, the only daughter of a researcher who is either a genius or a madman. Montgomery Loughton, a melancholic overseer with a tragic past and a propensity for alcohol, an outcast who assists Dr. Moreau with his experiments, which are financed by the Lizaldes, owners of the magnificent haciendas and plentiful coffers. The hybrids, the fruits of the doctor's labor, destined to blindly obey their creator and remain in the shadows, a motley group of part human, part animal monstrosities. All of them live in a perfectly balanced and static world, which is jolted by the abrupt arrival of Eduardo Lizalde, the charming and careless son of Dr. Moreau's patron, who will unwittingly begin a dangerous chain reaction. For Moreau keeps secrets, Carlota has questions, and in the sweltering heat of the jungle, passions may ignite. So this book is both a dazzling historical novel and a daring science fiction journey. Let me tell you how I felt about the novel. First of all, It was a little violent, so I want to say, if we're going to talk about dark elements here, some themes we have going on are alcoholism, there is some death, monsters, some versions of sexual harassment and assault as well. But overall, this is definitely more of a gothic, atmospheric feel. There's more questions. It leaves you wondering what makes us human, what constitutes humanity. Let me begin by discussing the layout of the book itself. You would think that because it's called The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, this would be exclusively Carlota's perspective, but it switches back and forth each chapter between Carlota and Montgomery. And I really appreciate that because I wasn't a huge fan of Carlota. I preferred Montgomery by far, but it is still focusing on Carlota. Next, I want to say the first part of the book, part 1, 1871. I struggled a little bit to get into the book. I'm not sure if it was because there's a lot of characters being introduced all at once, and backstory, it seemed like, was being shoved on there really heavily, and it was very hard to keep up with. I did struggle to get into the book originally from part 1. It started to pick up at the very end of part 1, and part 1's not that long, by the way. And I finally felt a little more intrigued as we started to unravel bits where Carlota gets to see more of the, I guess, negative parts of the hybrids and of her father's work. That was one thing I noticed was it was a little difficult to get into, but once I did get into it, I stayed into it. So I thought that was actually more important. It's fine that it took me a while to get into it. Part 2 and part 3 are both in the same year, 1877, and part 2 was interesting. I liked the dynamic between Carlota, Montgomery, the hybrids. I love Lupe and Chiquito in particular. Well, those are the ones that she focuses on. They're her companions for the most part. But those three, so Montgomery, Lupe, and Chiquito, were so awesome. We have Ramona as well, who is their housekeeper. I feel like she kind of comes in and out occasionally. It's like she pops in when she needs to, but then you don't really hear about her for a while, and it's like, oh yeah, they have a housekeeper. She doesn't pop in and doesn't seem to have as much of a impact on Carlota. She just seems to literally be like the housekeeper, which I thought was entertaining. So as far as the pacing of the book goes, I thought it was really well done. I didn't think it was this whirlwind of a book where it went by so fast. It was exciting and crazy, but it also it wasn't slow and sluggish. I didn't find myself dreaming and wandering off. I felt like it was a well-paced book, and I think that Silvia Moreno-Garcia does a great job with that. I felt myself immersed in her world really fast. So last year, my husband and I did go visit the Yucatan, and that probably helped a lot. But when she's talking about the jungles there and the heat and the cenotes and all of these things, I was brought back to Mexico, and it felt really great. You know, I was like, man, I would love to do this. And the fact that there was like this mad scientist lab that could have potentially be hidden in the Yucatan, I was like, oh, that's so cool. I thought that was actually quite perfect. The way she describes all of these things, including even like the smells, the feelings, the food, the culture, I really enjoyed it. I really did. I really also liked, by the way, just a sidebar, at the very end of the book, they do have a bit of a historical context for where the state of Mexico was during that period of time, because there's a lot of things that Silvia Moreno-Garcia integrates in the book historically that is stuff I never even thought about. For instance, there were a lot of immigrants in Mexico. I would have never even imagined, like, there were a lot of Chinese immigrants. There wasn't just the Spanish and the Mayans. There was a whole slew of other people, including other native tribes. We also have other European colonizers. We have a lot of multicultural aspects going on in Mexico during this time, and I think it really showed just kind of at least my lack of knowledge on Mexican history, and I did appreciate a lot of those finer details that really gave the book a lot more relevance. It just felt important, and it wasn't just thrown in there to be thrown in there. It felt very relevant. I really enjoyed it. So now let's go on to the actual characters of the book. I touched on this lightly, maybe heavily. I'm a little heavy-handed with my with my opinions sometimes. So I wasn't a huge fan of Carlota. In fact, speaking of heavy-handed, Carlota is a slappy slapperton. She slaps people all the time throughout the book, and I was always like, why is she so violent? She is so always just like slapping Montgomery, and like sometimes it's hilarious because I would slap him too, but man, she just loves to slap people. That's one thing. Carlota is also, admittedly, because she's isolated, she only knows so much of the world in general. She is incredibly naive. And naive characters tend to annoy me, but with Carlota, I think it actually makes sense. As much as I disliked it, it made sense. So I can't really knock Silvia Moreno-Garcia at all for Carlota, because we have her discovering this whole literal world outside of the lab and Dr. Moreau. Dr. Moreau and Carlota's relationship together is really interesting. I can relate to this a little bit because Carlota is trying her best. She wants to make her father proud, and it doesn't, throughout the book, it doesn't seem like she can, or that she can't do anything right. And I can see her frustrations and how upset she is, and honestly how betrayed she's felt throughout the story. Why, there's certain things that should have been revealed to her earlier and explained to her. But it actually kind of reminds me, if you guys are Stranger Things fans, alert, this potentially could be a spoiler, but there is a scene in the newer season where Eleven is talking to her papa, and I liked that scene because it was so different than what we've seen in the past with movies, where Eleven, she's still really compassionate and caring, but she doesn't give him the satisfaction. He's like, I love you, I have always loved you, and she doesn't return the favor. And I actually appreciate that, because we don't have to be like this. I don't like the toxicity surrounding forgiveness sometimes, which has been portrayed in film and books forever, and I'm seeing a little bit of this. This isn't an exact scene or anything in Dr. Moreau, but we've got a very similar relationship going on in Dr. Moreau as like Eleven and Papa. Anyways, that was a little bit of a random thing. My ADHD is a little out of control today. Anyway, so Carlota's character, even though I find her a little irksome, I also understand. It made sense. Her character would be like this. Montgomery Loughton is great. So he kind of is the opposite of Carlota, and it's because of his exposure to the world. So he's seen things, he's experienced life, he is older than Carlota, but also he hasn't been confined to the lab, he's done travels, and it adds to a little bit of his misery, and that's why he drinks. He's miserable. I'm sure some of us can understand. We've had periods of our life that is like this. And I also like the relationship between Montgomery and Carlota. It's natural and respectful. And at first I wanted it to be different, and then the more I sat on it, the more I'm like, you know what, never mind. I actually did like this. The hybrids I thought were great. So I like the fact that we didn't focus too much on the characteristics of each hybrid. It was subtly integrated throughout the story. So sometimes Lupe would have like furry hands or something like that, or like sharp teeth would be exposed, or like glowing eyes. But it's not like Silvia Moreno-Garcia focused so much on each individual trait and described every hybrid. It was just present a little bit throughout the book. And I think a part of this too is to illustrate that these creatures are, aside from their physical appearances, they have human features. They have a conscience, they have human experiences and emotions, and sometimes they might be a little exacerbated depending on the situation, or they feel compelled to do something because maybe their animalistic instinct kicks in, which granted, we all get this way sometimes, like in extreme situations, those kinds of traits would start appearing even in humans. So I liked all of their characters. I liked all of their traits, and I liked how they were integrated with each other. Dr. Moreau, I enjoyed. He is exactly what I would have imagined. He is the gaslighting king. He is so obsessed with his experiments, his science, and he will do anything to make it okay in the eyes of the world. And he's had practice to do that, to justify his actions and his choices. So I think all of the characters made sense. Some characters drove me crazy, but it all was, I think, perfectly thought out and pretty great. My only issue with the book, and this is why it's not like a 5-star for me, this is a 4-star book, is unfortunately the end. So the end, I felt like it kind of, it was tied off and it was fine. And I'm not sure if it's just because, honestly, maybe Silvia Moreno-Garcia didn't want the book to end, because I kind of didn't want the book to end, so maybe that's why I'm upset that it did, and I can't think of a good way to end it. It was sweet. It was actually a very sweet ending, and it wasn't, I wouldn't say an expected ending, especially considering the themes throughout the book, like passion in the jungle, that kind of thing. So it didn't end up you would have anticipated. This book focuses a lot on what it means to be a family, what it means to love, what kind of variations of love there are. There's no one love. Love doesn't just have one feeling. We love our friends, we love our family, we love our lovers, we love our spouses, and all of those things are different facets of love. And I think Silvia Moreno-Garcia does a great job going through the whole kaleidoscope of what love is and how one person can experience different versions of love for even just a single person, and how love can be so powerful and fade away so fast as well. How love doesn't necessarily conquer all, or how love isn't necessarily a reason for you to accept certain conditions. Just because you love somebody doesn't mean you have to be okay with the decisions the other person makes. So I like the themes of this book. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. It's not scary. It's not really spooky. It's romantic. It is filled with this beautiful real land. Like, the Yucatan is beautiful and it's a little bizarre, but it deals more with our emotions, how one person's version of events may look differently to another person, how we can't assume certain things about specific people. There's a lot of really deep layers of this book, and I've sat on it for a day, and the more I sit on it, the better it gets. This is a great book, and I do highly recommend it. I highly recommend all of her works. She's just a fantastic author. I feel so grateful that she provides these beautiful pieces to us, and I can't wait for more from Silvia Moreno-Garcia. All right, I'm done gushing about Silvia. I love her so much. So check out The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. I'd love to hear from those of you that have read the classic H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau. I want to compare and contrast the two books together, and maybe they have the same kind of themes in a different way. It'd be really cool. You guys can chat with us on a variety of platforms. You can comment and review on the actual podcast here on your favorite listening app. Not only that, but join us on Facebook and Instagram at Dark Side of the Library. And you can join us on Amazon.com/live/Dark Side of the Library. We do a lot of streams, especially book streams. If you do enjoy this podcast, make sure to share it with your friends who also like dark reads. We like to publish every Wednesday and Friday. Wednesdays are usually our long, curated episodes. We try to give you new books coming out every month from nonfiction, children's, fiction, etc. And Fridays are usually my minisodes, where I'll do deep dives of books I've been reading lately. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a creeptastic week. I will see you next time.